Hello there, Star Wars fans. Welcome back to another episode of Rule the Galaxy. I'm Jess, and I'm here tonight with our regular Alfie and our very special guest, Jonathan Davis, whose voice you're probably very familiar with if you've listened to any Star Wars audiobooks, or I mean, maybe even books outside of the Star Wars universe. So, um, Alfie, excited to be with you tonight. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, thank you. I'm excited too. I love getting into and hearing more behind the stories of you know what goes into making Star Wars. Uh, my mind just went completely blank here because I've been trying to think of something all day and keep it in my mind. But yeah, I just be interested to see and talk to our guest his experiences with these audiobooks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jonathan, for joining us tonight. How are you doing today?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me. It was great to be here before, and I'm looking forward to diving in with you all.
Yeah, this is Jonathan's second time on the podcast, and it's kind of fun because neither Alfie or I were on that first episode, so we're not going to be doubling up too much. Get a whole new experience tonight. Um, but yeah, if people aren't aware, I was able to look up some stats on Jonathan's Star Wars related audiobook career. Now, Wikipedia doesn't seem like it's been fully updated since some of the more recent projects, but as far as they say, at last count, you've got about 63 works under your belt for Star Wars alone. And I mean, I think that before we started, you mentioned that you thought that we're coming up on the 20-year mark of recording for Star Wars. Is that correct?
Yeah, for me, yeah, and I think that must be about right. That sounds about right to me. Um, there may even be well, yeah. I'm assuming I haven't seen the list on Wikipedia in a while, so I know that there are some projects that were made as discs back in the or even as cassette tapes back in the books on tape days when it was called that. Um, and I don't even think they're listed like on Audible or sites like that. Or maybe they may be. You know, there was one called Dark Rendezvous, which is a great story, and it may be on Wikipedia. Um, but I know that it wasn't available on Audible last time I checked. But yeah, it's been, I believe, the first project that I did for Random House at the time, Random House Audio, with Kevin Thompson, who is still the
Yep.
director and producer. Um, I was Attack of the Clones, and that was 20 years ago, or about 20 years ago.
Yeah, I suppose they just had the 20-year celebration at Star Wars Celebration, the panel for that. So it must have been right around that time.
And it was fascinating. The what was so cool back then, what I remember particularly about that project was this was before, you know, there weren't tablets around back then. So everything when we recorded and we read, it was all scripts that we had in hand. We had the text that, and it would take longer to record also because there was a lot of page turning. So there's a lot of editing that had to be done, afterwards, which is a lot easier to do these days. Um, but back then in the margins, uh, I even think it was Lucas himself or somebody definitely that was involved at Lucasfilm. They would write in the margins about the film and about what the story was like, and let's edit this, and let's they were talking about changes, and it was just really kind of a back and forth between the author and Lucas. Um, and the books, it was so what's so cool about doing the books that are related to the movies themselves, and perhaps those who have spoken to Mark Thompson, he would agree, is that we we get the stories before the movies are released. So it's really neat to at back then to have seen what they were talking about before the movie was even released. This is Attack of the Clones. So that was fascinating.
Yeah, you're kind of even preempting some of a couple of different things that I wanted to ask you about. One, which was, how things have changed in the last 20 years. I mean, this is a period where over 2 decades, you've seen a whole host of changes related to the technologies that are being used, or even the methods by which you're recording these things. And I'm just kind of wondering, would you mind talking a little bit about how things have changed in the last 20 years, especially in relation to, like, I think that it's kind of funny that with the COVID pandemic, it seems like the entire world got clued in to the technologies related to, even just things like this, just ways to record, ways to work from
Right.
home. Did your work change much related to COVID as opposed to other greater changes that had happened over the last 20 years?
Well, for me specifically, and for most voice actors, if you're a voice actor that had a home studio, which I did prior to the pandemic, uh, I was fortunate that it was easier for me to transition to working completely from home most of the time, and specifically for the Star Wars audiobooks, I would never record at home. We would always go to a studio in New York City to record, and a very specific studio because the producers had have a special relationship with um, a fellow named Paul Goodrich, who has a studio named Merlin Studios, and he is an Academy Award winner, and he mixes and masters and does the sound design and many times records, or it's at least his studio that the projects are recorded at. So it was a big change there because then everything had to be done from the studio. I mean, I'm sorry, from the home studio. And when we were doing projects like uh,
Yeah,
yes,
Dr. Afra.
Doc Afra, and Tempest Runner, those were multicasts, but they were done completely from home studios using Zoom or Skype or whatever other technology that we had to be able to record all of us together, in one sequence for those multicast projects. Usually we'd all be in the studio and we'd all be in one room with a mic in the middle and maybe 7 or 8 of us around it. That's what we did
Dooku.
for Dooku. Yes, for Dooku. So that was the first big multicast that we did. We had also done Mark and January Lavoie and I had done the uh, Shakespeare projects, the
Yes.
Star Wars Shakespeare by Ian Desher, which was fantastic. And we had done those projects prior to that, um, but then they expanded it with Dooku. They kind of expanded that project to include a lot more narrators, which they've been doing more and more so in the recent years. So that was a big change, just having to do it in the home studios. And now I think probably things are starting to ease up so that more and more people are doing it in different studios. I recorded Brotherhood in a studio outside of my house, in a different studio. So that was nice to be involved with that again.
Do you enjoy that? Is it a mark where you're able to, like, does it put you in a different mentality when you're able to go someplace else, or are you pretty, you know, used to either way, anything's good for you?
I enjoy both for different reasons. Obviously, I can roll out of bed and just go to my booth and record, or something like that. But then also it's nice to get out of the house and to go into the studio and to have, um, to be one on one where you're actually seeing, your director and your producer and your sound engineer. Um, but I'm not partial to one or the other particularly.
I still suppose I mean, it was nice to be in a line of work where, things changed when the world went to social distancing, but I mean, you were ready.
I lucked out. It was just a bit fortunate in my profession, just to have that. But it did change. There were a lot of people that weren't used to that. You know, there were a lot of people that solely worked from a studio. You know, that was not their own, and they had to adapt. I think now everybody that's in VO in voiceover, pretty much the majority of them have their own setups.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, it even strikes me though that voice actors who worked on the Clone Wars and other Star Wars
Yeah,
animation shows, they talk as well about the fact
sure.
that like when those were recorded, I mean, there was a real, principal theme of wanting to have everybody in the studio to be able to record together. For
Yeah.
you, when you're doing projects like Dooku Jedi Lost, do you find that it has a real significant impact on your own performance when you're surrounded by people who are also on the project?
Oh, sure. That's a lot of fun. Yeah, definitely, because you're feeding off each other, and particularly, when you're in this, when you can see them, when you can see each other's, reactions, that's extremely helpful. But that doesn't always work out anyway, and particularly in animation, a lot of people record on their own. They don't, it depends on people's schedules. So, it's they got to be really lucky that everybody shows up on the same day to have that. So that's almost a bit unusual, when you have, for instance, with Jedi Lost, when we did that, I mean, everybody was there, and we were all we were all really, circled around the with our own separate microphones, but we were all pretty much in a circle working off each other. So that was exceptional.
Yeah, it's been so fun to see what they're doing with these big cast recordings. I'm such a fan of that kind of radio type of
Hmm.
program that it's fun to be able to have the novels and in a way, to be able to have just one person giving their interpretation of all of the characters.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fun, but there's something really really cool that they're diving into all of these bigger cast recordings as well.
What's great about when you're doing it when it's a single narrator, because this is what I love about narration in general, is that for me, my favorite part of narration is not necessarily the dialogue or character work. It's really setting the scene,
Mhm.
describing a world, describing an emotion, describing the dreariness of a planet, if it's, describing the deserts of Tatooine or the bustling metropolis of Coruscant, to describe that and to describe the world if you're in the Galactic Senate, and to describe the feeling of being within that uh, Congress, it's exciting to dive into that. That's what I really enjoy, and that you're not necessarily going to get in a multicast. That's going to be slightly different. They're not going to really describe everything there. It's going to be more like, as you said, more like a radio play. So they are different.
I have noticed that is something that, I'm somebody who listens to a lot of the audiobooks while I'm driving, and usually I
Hmm.
can listen at a quicker tempo than I'll put it up to a one and a
Sure.
half speed or two.
Yeah. Right.
You can't do that as much with the radio dramas when
Oh
it's
yeah.
going from person to person.
Yeah.
This it just makes me realize that there's really you're still doing mental work as you're listening to these things. And I think that there's something to be said that when, at least when it's one narrator with an audiobook and it's a story that's obviously not all dialogue,
Yeah.
that at least to me, I found that it's a little bit easier to clip along with those kinds of productions. But with the dramas, you really got to kind of slow down because you're not handed everything.
Hmm.
If there's a setting or something, they have to convey that in the dialogue. And other
Yeah.
places it might be left a little bit ambiguous, but
True.
I they really do bring you in as somebody who kind of has to interpret the entirety of the story as you're going along.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Alfie, did you have any questions for our guest tonight?
I did, but I got to be honest, listening to you two talk back and forth, I've just kind of gotten lost in this. It's been a really good conversation so far. I think looking through this list right here, one that, going back to what Jonathan was saying about setting the scenes, I really want to go back and listen to this Revenge of the Sith audiobook, because that is honestly one of my favorite Star Wars books. And I would love to hear it narrated that way. And in fact, I think, I'm just going to go ahead and buy that right now.
Yeah, that one really is a masterpiece, and so much fun to be able to hear it read aloud. It's so like that's one that I find that across the fandom, everybody's just kind of in agreement that the characterization of Revenge of the Sith, the kind of the grandiose mythological feel of it is just so palpable.
That whole opening to that book, gets me every time.
Exactly. I remember the opening. I was just about to mention it. That still is with me. You know, it really sets the mood, and it's cool just to and not just in the book itself, but as a narrator or as an audience listening to that, it can be quite thrilling.
Yeah,
it's fun. Sorry, you.
Because with that book, visually in the movie, that first 30 seconds, there's no dialogue. It's just two ships in a battle. But it gives you such a sense of what is happening. And when you go to that book, it goes a completely different route. And just like you said, it really sets that tone of what this book is about. What is this scene trying to show us about Anakin and Obi-Wan, how they've become, two brothers.
Right.
It strikes me that the first couple of projects that you worked on, Attack of the Clones, then Revenge of the Sith after that, you were right there with Anakin and Obi-Wan right from the beginning. And especially when it comes to Obi-Wan, I mean, you've really been able to dig into most of the books related to him. You've done after that it would have been Kenobi, right?
Yes,
Kenobi,
right.
And then Master and Apprentice, and now just very recently Brotherhood. So with those characters, especially Obi-Wan, what is it like to be able to have those characters that you're able to return to again and again? And are you able to pull them out of your head just like that?
Yeah, I mean, particularly, there's certain characters, and yes, Obi-Wan is one. I loved that I finally got the opportunity, because Qui-Gon is one of my favorite characters, if not my favorite. So to be able to voice him, I was very excited to do that. And they're also to mention, they're also, before Kenobi, I did a series called Jedi Quest.
Yes.
So there was a few. It was really, the beginning, kind of with a very, like a young Anakin, not a Jake Lloyd Anakin, but a young Anakin and Obi-Wan, you know, with these side adventures that were really charming. So that was really, I think, right, after the movies, we dove into those, or after Attack of the Clones, I kind of dove into those books. Then came Revenge of the Sith, and then much later Kenobi, and then Master and Apprentice, and now Brotherhood. But it is, we've talked I've told people on different podcasts, we've talked about how um, there was a time when Mark and I, when it was primarily Mark and I as narrators, Mark tended to do certain characters. Maybe he did more of the from A New Hope onward, certain characters like Luke and Han, and I had the honor to focus on Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and characters from the what used to be the prequels, and and then, or even, light and dark characters. Mark would do more uh, Jedi centric characters, and I would do the darker characters, such as the Darth Bane trilogy, and several books that were where Vader was prominent.
Yeah, Bane, Vader, you did Maul.
Maul,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah. So
Oh, what fun. Do you have a preference when it comes to diving into the psyche of, good characters, bad characters? Is
Oh,
there
of
any
course.
difference?
Yes, yeah. Conflicted characters are always much more fun to do, I would think. I mean, in general. And yeah, you can really dive into their psyche and flesh them out in a way. Yeah, I tend to enjoy that. And I think it just suits my voice and my style also.
In preparation for this, I listened to the previous episode that you did with Rule the Galaxy, and I
Hmm.
really encourage our listeners to go back and find that episode with Jonathan. I remember on that one, this was before you recorded Brotherhood, and at that
Yes.
time you were talking about the fact that this would be coming up. You'll probably take a week to go do that, and that's how long it would take. 5 or 6 days to
Yes.
complete a book. Is that pretty typical? And is that how it usually pans out?
It is, yeah, that is typical. Yeah, 5, maybe 7, depending on the length. Um, yeah, that is kind of what we go to the studio, and we're there about 7 hours, and yeah, it takes about maybe 5 days, maybe a little longer.
Is that something where you've had to, over the last couple of decades, work your way up to being able to speak that long? Did it, or have you always been able to kind of pump out
That's
that
a
many
good
words?
question. No, that's a great question. It's it is it you it is it's an endurance game. It really is, where um this kind of, not everybody can do this kind of narration. A lot of people in voiceover are used to doing, you know, a 30-minute spot, or maybe if you're doing animation, maybe you're doing 30, 40 minutes, I mean, you may be doing several episodes a day, but still it's not quite the same, where it's just you, doing pages and pages of text, and storytelling. And it's almost like, instead of like a sprinter, it really is like an endurance runner. And it does take time. My very first project, not a Star Wars audiobook, but my very first audiobook that I ever did, I lost my voice within like 3 days. I lost it. I was new. I had not didn't have the experience. I was also sick, which probably had something to do with it. I just caught a bug. But I didn't know how to. I wasn't too keen in terms of taking care of myself and knowing how to reserve my voice in a way, because I have even recorded sometimes when I have been ill, and you just have to find ways to barrel through, or in a way to really temper your sound and temper your delivery.
Right.
So yes, it does. The more you do it, like any muscle, like anybody that's exercising anything, uh, the stronger it gets. And your
Alfie,
technique changes too. I'm sorry, your technique also, you become aware of you develop your own technique and your own way of doing it. And it may be kind of obtuse when I say that, but when you're involved in this kind of niche of voiceover, you kind of understand it. There have been celebrities that I know, that they'll people want to hire them thinking, oh, they're great actors, and they are great actors. They're great cinema actors, or they're great, or even a great stage actor. Although stage actors tend to uh, have a kind of understand how to use their voice in a different way than cinema actors sometimes. And some people go, and they'll say, I'll never do it again. It was too much. It's just not, it's not for me. So it is. And there are some actors out there, people that you may not even realize, but they're fantastic narrators. such as Bronson Pinchot from Perfect Strangers, if you remember that sitcom, and Will Patton and Campbell Scott, Kate Winslet, who's an A-list actor, but she's fantastic. Tandy
Yeah.
Newton is great. These are just people that I'm mentioning off the cuff who are celebrities. Alan Cumming, Ed
Mhm.
Herman. These are people that are really, really they're really good at this medium too. But it's not for everybody.
I work at a publishing house and we do audiobooks of our own, and it's amazing
Oh,
that sometimes you get those authors who they just desperately want to be the one to do the audiobook, and if they're really insistent, we'll let them do
ah,
it. And
sure.
sometimes they come away saying, that was great, and some of them come away saying, man, that is something that is much more work than I ever would have expected it would be.
Yeah, absolutely. It it takes it really takes a certain skill. There are even people that were I know that are part of the Star Wars film world who have done some audiobooks and
Mhm.
found it very difficult because once again, cinema is a visual medium and this is an oral medium, so it's just a very different animal.
Right. Alfie, did you have anything that you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just wondered, do you have any? Is there anything you do to prepare yourself, like in the weeks up to when you have a role like this, and then while you're doing it, is there any techniques that you found really help to prolong your voice during recording one of these?
I think, well, we most of us read the text prior, or, sometimes it's better not to read. It's good to be fresh and kind of do it on the cuff so that every moment is fresh to you. But it's good to have at least a sensibility of what happens in the text. One of my very first projects. So Kevin Thompson, before I auditioned for Star Wars, I had done another project with Kevin, and it was a novel by Neil Stevenson, the seminal cyberpunk writer, and he wrote a book called Snow Crash, which is a very popular book and a very popular audiobook still. And in that, I made the mistake, and we had to go back and record it because I I didn't read far enough into it, and I decided that one of my characters was going to be a Rastafarian. That's how I decided he was going to be. So I went in and I took a bold leap and I really went for kind of with this character, and then it turned out that not until like halfway through the book do you discover that he's from the Aleutian Islands, you know. So that just wouldn't work. So we had to go back, after we finished recording, we went back to all his stuff, his dialogue, and we re-recorded it. So that's where you really have to be familiar with what the text says.
When it comes
Um,
to Star Wars books, when you have like lots of characters who are already in the canon and may
right.
have appeared in film or TV, do you have anybody, are you given files or episodes to watch to show you what they sound like, or do you do that research yourself, or what's that like?
Well, it's difficult. Like if you're doing something, for instance, I know. Here's one example. Uh, I did the book Catalyst,
Love it. I
and
just I just finished. It's my favorite book now.
I love it too. I think it's fascinating, and I love the relationship between Krennic and Galen Erso. I mean, it's just a terrific story, and it really, I mean, it feeds into Rogue One. I recommend anybody who loves Rogue One to read or listen to Catalyst. It adds so much
Hmm,
to
put that on the list.
oh, you should. You should. And so that was before Rogue One came out. So Catalyst primarily deals with Krennic and Galen, and I believe Saw Gerrera is in it too. So we didn't know at the time. Oh, actually, we did. I knew. I did know that Megs Mikkelsen was playing Galen Erso. I knew that Ben Mendelsohn was playing Krennic. And because of that, I actually lobbied for that because they're two of my favorite actors. And I said, please, please, please consider me for this project, and I was very fortunate to do it. And then Forrest Whitaker was doing Saw Gerrera. And so we did, I listened to, I didn't know what they were going to do for the characters, but I was familiar with the actors enough that I would listen somewhat to and actually we may have even had I think, I'm not certain about this. This may be apocryphal in a way, but I may have even listened to snippets from Rogue One or maybe, it was trailers. We had trailers.
Okay.
So we were able to listen to some snippets and decide, okay, that's a snippet of Ben Mendelsohn, that's a snippet of Whitaker. So we were able to do something and take a semblance of it, even though it may not have been exactly, but it was a semblance. Um, but yes, and in other cases, yeah, we listen to, if it's the Emperor or if it's Vader or whoever, we do listen to scenes or we become familiar with it, or Kenobi, Qui-Gon, and you know, on and upward.
I've heard you mention before that you consider Mark Thompson to be more of he's the one who can just imitate. And
He's a fantastic mimic and he's great at the impressions. Yes.
where do
Yes.
you find yourself when it comes to, trying to get those character voices? What goes into that for you?
For me, it's if we're talking about um so there's two separate things. If we're talking about characters that we're creating, um for instance, I was talking about Rael Averross recently from
Oh,
Master and Apprentice, and I kind of had an idea who I wanted to cast in my head, like who would I see in that role. And I do that. I tend to say, okay, this is who. If it's because I it's a very filmic to me. Audiobooks is a filmic medium too. So I do kind of, cast somebody that means something to me, so I have an idea of who that would be. So for me, like Rael Averross was, and I'm giving it away to, but it was, to me, he was Sam Elliott. That's who I
yeah.
saw in that role. So that was kind of what I kind of focused on in my head to do when we're doing there are some characters that I'm confident in doing. I feel confident, imitating Liam Neeson. I feel confident doing Ewan McGregor. And then there are others that, with me, it's what's so great with Mark is he can do it on the you know the drop of a dime. He can just, he's fantastic at really bringing in the essence of who they are, or doing a fantastic impression. It With me, it takes, when I'm in the moment, that's when I know I can shine, when I'm in the moment of doing it. um, for me, uh, my focus again is really on building the world, and that's most important to me, not to get the most perfect impression of a character, because I'm not going to be them all the time. It's not someone who, that's what's important for me, is painting the picture of the world. And that's what's most important to me, over being pitch perfect with an impression.
Right. Yeah, that strikes me very much with, just listening to something like Brotherhood.
Hmm.
And like you said, you've got this, the city world of Coruscant, but then for that, you had Cato Neimoidia, and everything
Yeah.
has its own world. And especially, there are going to be worlds that come to mind more easily for Star Wars fans. They're going to be able to conjure up those images pretty quickly. But when you have those ones that are either something that's totally been made up for a certain book or whatnot, like it does strike me that there's a method to just, like, you know you're painting a picture, And if you take, if you're, and sometimes that painting is done a little bit better if it can kind of just be free flowing, and there's kind of a dance to it.
Yes, and it's funny when you talk about that book with the Cato Neimoidians. I remember like my direction from PRH Audio was they really wanted to stand clear. They didn't want it to, they didn't want us to imitate the characters from Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones. I mean, they didn't want us to uh, to really imitate the characters as they were back then. They wanted us to have a different approach because they were a bit too cartoonish,
Yeah.
you know. So we wanted to pull back. So with all those characters, which were very important in the Brotherhood story, we really wanted to have a more realistic, portrayal. So again, once again, like I would have to cast, like who would I cast in these roles? I'm not going to see like I don't see the alien when I'm casting it. It's not I don't see an alien. I don't try to do that as much, but I cast somebody, as that person. And I wish I remember who. I don't remember everybody now that I did for like Roog. I had a
Yeah.
specific person, and I'm trying to remember who it may have been.
Do you
Uh,
ever do you ever get input from the authors at all regarding that? I know that Claudia Gray, she is somebody who very often will fan cast her own characters. So I'm thinking of Master and
oh
Apprentice
wow.
with Pax and Rahara. I know
Hmm.
that I can't remember. I think it was Gemma Chan for Rahara. I can't remember who Pax was. But do you ever get any
Huh.
input from the authors directly, or is that all coming through Penguin Random
You
House
know,
Audio?
we actually did. We did. Now that I think about it, with Brotherhood, uh, we did get um, not for Master and Apprentice, but with Brotherhood, the author did provide who he viewed, in certain roles. And
Okay.
we did listen to snippets of those people.
And
Now that I
so that
forgot
that
about that.
that would have been for people like Rug and Mill.
Yes, absolutely. And I got to tell you, there were some people I had no idea who they were. So for me, it was like I really did have to listen to the clips, but they were very specific. Like the author liked certain voice actors or certain people from perhaps the Clone Wars series or other or like a video game actress or something, and we listened to those. In Master and Apprentice, it was different. I wish I would have known that because that's great. Uh, I know my view for one of the characters was Richard E. Grant. That's what I did, I believe, for
Okay.
Pax. Is that yes? Um, so there were some. I did I was not aware of that, and I wish I was. I mean, I was not aware of Claudia's uh, preferences.
It's good to know, though. It's always really interesting to me to kind of know. Um, I mean, these kinds of projects, they're such a collaborative thing. You've got somebody who has written the darn thing, but
Yeah.
you've got a whole team on the publishing side, and then for you guys taking it and giving it life, and a whole team surrounding that. So it's amazing how many people it actually takes to bring one of these projects to life.
And the director is terrific too. I mean, and I've known him so long now, so we almost have like a shorthand with dealing with things and talking about. Uh, he knows my approach. He knows my attack with the language or the characters, so that he can. He's a really great guide, and he really helps formulate the whole projects and the producers too.
That's lovely. That's lovely. Well, one more question for me before, I know we kind of wanted to talk about, one or two other things, but
Sure.
um with your entire corpus of Star Wars content, I'm sure there are certain projects that really stand out, stuff like the Bane trilogy and stuff like that, things that people really know and have enjoyed. Are there any that you feel are underappreciated that you either really enjoyed working on, or that you just feel like, maybe people should go back to, especially, stuff like from Legends? What needs a
Mhm.
resurgence?
Well, we mentioned Catalyst.
Yes.
I enjoyed uh, the Battlefront book, um, Twilight Company, Battlefront Twilight
Yeah.
Company. I'm sorry, sometimes, as you said, 63 titles, so I'm trying to remember all of them. But I really enjoyed that because what I loved about that story is that, not all the characters are, I think, with the exception of maybe an appearance of Vader. Um, Mainly they're created specifically for those stories, probably for the game. Um, but what I loved about that, similar to Rogue One, was that there's no Jedi, there's no Sith really. It's just regular people. It's following the rebels, and they may be different. Some of them may be aliens, but none of them have really, any special powers. They're really the grunts, and I like that storyline. It was different. Um, I really like Dark Lord, Rise of Vader, because that, similar to Kenobi, to the series that came out, to Obi-Wan Kenobi, it's really about Anakin's transformation into Darth Vader. And there's a lot of segments which is about Anakin becoming, adapting to being in the suit, adapting to being a cyborg, adapting to the voice modulation, adapting to the breathing apparatus, where he's not Anakin, he's slowly becoming Vader. I love that. That was the first time that we really hear that, or we really sense that. And I think in the new series they approach that too. But that was the first time, and that was Dark Lord. Um, my favorites, I love the Darth Bane trilogy. I love Kenobi. I loved the segment in Kenobi with the Tuskens, the Tusken Raiders, which is of course what they installed in the Boba Fett series. In the Legends book Kenobi, it's really Kenobi who eventually meets the Tuskens. So, and get to know them, and you really, there's all these sequences about why they, how they wrap themselves in their garb and their masks and their breathing tubes and everything. And a lot of them are women. Spoiler alert, underneath all of that, at least in Kenobi, in John Jackson Miller's book. Um, so that's another one that I love. I was just talking to somebody else about MedStar, which is uh, the series which is about pretty much a MASH unit in the rebels, the rebel MASH unit, and it's a series where it's just about these doctors, helping people, during the Galactic Wars. So that's interesting too.
Those are some great ones. I think that everything that you mentioned, I think still on my to be listened to list. So I'm gonna have to move those to the top. So,
Sure.
but
Dark
you
Dark
mentioned,
Lord is one of my favorites. Just
oh,
and he described it perfectly. I've always loved that book just for that reason.
that's great. I'll have to do that one. So, but you mentioned Kenobi, so that's a good segue there too. I know that
Yeah.
on the last episode we talked about the Book of Boba Fett, and since then we've
Right.
gotten even more content. So, um, I don't know. How about just feel free. What did you think about that whole series?
I enjoyed it. I think, I thought Ewan McGregor was top notch. He
Mhm.
always is. And I like the direction it went, and I like how it ended. I like the direction. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel with, uh, you know, preteen Leia. but in the end, I really liked it. Yeah, I think overall I quite enjoyed it. What was the take at Rule the Galaxy?
Well, I wasn't around when we did the final look. Alfie, were you there when did kind of an overview?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall we all enjoyed the series. Just like with every bit of content, you're going to have things that you may not like as much as the other, but overall we all thought it was pretty good. A good
I
fun
think
series.
there was some, there were some things like well, I don't know. I don't, it's, like they're just, sometimes like they were focusing on some, this is I think with Boba Fett too, they were focusing on promoting some characters that I just thought, I was like, why are they focusing on this person? It was like a throwaway character. There was, I forgot his name. It was like, they were like talking about him like he was going to be the next big thing. And I went, he's not very good and he's not very essential. Why are they doing that? This is just like one of the pilots or something they were talking about. Or even Kumail Nanjiani. I was like, what's that character about? Is that really necessary?
Yeah,
I don't know. I wasn't, there were some things. But taking that aside and getting to the storyline, the prime storyline, I really thought I thought it was strong. See, I loved oh, what was her name?
Riva,
That was a shame. No,
uh, Tala.
Tala.
I love Tala.
Tala. She was, and I was like, why'd they do? Why did they kill off somebody else? I thought I liked her a lot. I thought she did a great job, and she's a veteran actress, and it was really, somebody who knew. You could just tell with Ewan and with her, Joel Edgerton, they're really great cinema actors. And some of the other people really aren't cinema actors originally. Maybe they're comics, or maybe they're right out of acting school and they're trying to promote them, but they're green. But compared to like her, Indira Varma, is that her? I forget.
Yeah.
Yes, excuse me. Indira Varma and Ewan and Joel, Rupert Friend as the Grand Inquisitor, Hayden. I mean, they were all quite good. I did enjoy it.
It strikes me that and I actually talked about this on the last episode that I was on. Um I just really feel like Disney really wants to sit down on like we're going to market by titling these shows after a main character, somebody who's going to be recognizable. So then we get things like Kenobi or Obi-Wan Kenobi, we get Andor, we're going to have Ahsoka, like all of these
Right.
things. But then it does kind of, that kind of marketing opens up the criticism of, well, why did we get 2 episodes of Mandalorian season 2.5
Exactly. Right,
in
right,
a
right.
show called The Book of Boba Fett? And if
Yes.
you're gonna do that, then
Yeah.
why not give it a title that is a little bit more representative of this is going to be either an anthology show or just kind of a group kind of experience. So I don't know. I'm definitely very, like, even I know Diego Luna has said that Andor is kind of the same way. It's not all about
Mm.
him. And I'm just kind of like,
Mm.
oh, see, I'm really
Yeah.
excited about that show because I do think that there's a lot of opportunity for character development across the board. But then I
Yeah.
just go, why do we have to title it after one person?
Yeah. Right. Right. And then it turns out to be about somebody else. That's what
Yep.
I think the criticism with the Kenobi. It seemed to be about. I forgot her name. Riva. Is that?
Yeah, Riva.
There was a. It seemed to be like some people were complaining about why didn't they just call it Riva?
Yeah.
In a way. I mean, it seemed to be a lot about her journey more than Obi-Wan's journey in some ways. Um, I don't know how I felt about that. I liked it, but I can understand that too. It did seem, it I would have liked it to be a bit more pared down so it was really about him. Him and maybe Leia, him and Leia, you know.
I was really surprised by, I mean, I was not expecting Obi-Wan and Leia, but I do think that
Yeah, I was
Ewan
too.
and
Yeah.
Vivian, I mean, the show, it was ride or die on their relationship.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I mean, that firecracker of a little girl just
Yeah.
nailed it.
She did. She did.
Absolutely incredible. But I will say that, like, I still look back and I still think it feels like they swapped the stories for Boba and Obi-Wan. It feels like Boba could have or should have been given the story of Boba going through the galaxy, especially after he's, gotten his armor back, he's gotten his ship back. He
Mm-hmm.
can do that. He can go and see the seedy parts of the galaxy. We could get the underworld story. And I mean, for me, I really did love Kenobi, but I also absolutely got people's criticisms of, I really wish he wouldn't have left Tatooine.
That's what I love about uh, John's book, Kenobi. I love that he's more of this man, really a recluse in essence, somebody in seclusion in the desert. Um, and I would have liked to have seen more of that. And yeah, that would have been interesting had he met the Tuscans, um, and dealt more with the world of Tatooine instead of leaving the world, as you said. Um, I agree with that completely. Yeah, and I wonder what would have been if it would have been, as you said, where Boba would have been more of the adventurer. Exactly. The mercenary in a
Boba's the
way.
one who's been stuck on Tatooine. He wants to get off.
Exactly. Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I know that there's always been a question of whether Boba will be back for a second season. There's kind of
Mm,
these rumors floating around that
interesting.
Ewan would love to do a season 2 of Kenobi, and that kind of
Hmm.
opens it up again, being like, well, what are you gonna do? Are we gonna keep everything on Tatooine? Are they gonna go off again? I'm not
What I
really sure what
loved,
they would
well,
do.
in the book, which so it's funny when I saw the story, the series, and after doing the narration for Kenobi, there was some talking about description and describing a world when they show Ewan in his cave, in Tatooine, and he has the is it the Aope? Is that the creature?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
Hmm.
So and that's right out of the book. I mean, I was
Hmm.
like, oh my God, I remember that. Like he had this pregnant Aope, and it's like whoever made the set, I was like, that's exactly how I pictured what everything looked like from John Jackson Miller's book. I found that very interesting um, to see that. So kudos to them there. I really think that it kind of was cool, in the set designers and just how they pulled that off.
Yeah, Alfie, do you have anything?
Yeah. Having spent so much time with Anakin and Obi-Wan, how did you feel about the flashback scene of their training?
I liked it. I like those, and I also liked. This is slightly off of that, but I like. Well, I hope I'm not giving anything away for those who haven't seen it yet. But I like the appearance of. This is a spoiler. I like the appearance of Qui-Gon. And because that's also out of the book.
Hmm.
He has these throughout. What the Kenobi audiobook and novel is he's continuously having these meditations where they're like soliloquies, they're like monologues where he's attempting to talk to Qui-Gon. So that was really cool to see that actually in the series too.
Yeah, that's what I really was hoping for more of. I mean, I know that for me, like I said, I was kind of hoping that it would be a little bit more of a smaller story on Tatooine, but like the heart of it still does need to be him wrestling with that trauma
Yeah.
and finally getting to that place where he is able to kind of open himself up to the Force again and make that connection that Yoda always hoped he would with Qui-Gon. So that's the stuff where it's like, oh, that I really love that we've gotten to see that on screen. And I don't know what they would plan if they were going to do a second part of
I
it,
have
but
no idea either. Yeah.
because I just look at it like, again, I'm not somebody who likes sequels if they don't have a purpose. So we got the big story with Obi-Wan leaving Tatooine this time around, where I would have preferred it to be, very local. Obi-Wan dealing with a local threat, just like in Kenobi, regardless of if they, dramatize that one
Right.
exactly. But
Mhm.
then dealing with, having flashbacks from the Clone Wars and kind of bringing in that era, and having flashbacks to people who were important to him, and being able to um, wrestle not only with his role in Anakin's life, but also Qui-Gon and other people like that. So I don't know. That's what I don't like now, though, is that it seems like there is a desire to continue, at least from Ewan's part. It seems like he had a lot of fun doing it, and who can blame him? But at the same time, I kind of go, well, what I do love is that limited series, as it was meant to be, you do see that arc. And so when you give a character that catharsis, I really kind of go, you have to be careful trying to do another series if there's not really that kind of internal drama that he's going through. I don't know if it would land the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it would. I think I agree with you. They had their shot with the first season to kind of do that series, and now that a second character growth series of almost the same exact as the first. I don't know. I would feel it would be a little forced.
Yeah. I think that there are ways that they could do it if they, I don't know, find some other way to tie it back to his past in the Clone Wars, but it's got to be something different. It can't be
Right.
related to Anakin. It can't be related to Qui-Gon. He's gone through that already, and I think I don't think that the fans would be very forgiving if they did bring Anakin in again and had them meet yet again before.
That kind of story should have been the
No,
first
they
season.
can't. Yeah, you're right. I
Yeah.
can't see that either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We will see, but
We'll
I think
find out.
that we'll still be here imbibing all of this new content, and that, we're kind of suckers like that, aren't we? Just kind of whatever they give us.
As much as we complain, we're still gonna watch it. We're still gonna love it. Still gonna talk about it nonstop.
Exactly. So, well, thank you so much for being willing to come and have these conversations. It's so nice to be able to
Sure.
make these connections, and I just love knowing that in the midst of all of the works that you do, that there is something special about Star Wars that you enjoy beyond just it being a job.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And my best to Joe and the guys.
Yes, thank you. Thank you as well to our listeners. We appreciate you so much. You're the reason, we'd have these conversations regardless, because we're just like that, but you're the reason why we do this. So if you have interest in reaching out to us, feel free to find us on Twitter at Rule the Galaxy. I always forget, where are the other places that they can find us?
Pretty
Alfie?
much everywhere: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
And the merch store.
And a merch store on Etsy.
On Etsy. So yeah, lots of places to find us. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening, and may the force be with you.